I have to apologize. There's one guest I forgot. Connie Morris is with us because the triplets didn't drive on their own. So Grandma brought them. So good to have you, Connie, with us as well. And look for your return. You know, it's one of the most amazing statements in the Bible. It's actually a request, and then the statement follows. And we talked about it when Jesus was on the cross. Remember the criminal, the thief said, "Lord, remember me." It's like, dude, how dare you ask for some type of salvation last moment because you deserve to be there. And the audacity to wait to the very last moment to try to get some mercy. But what's even more amazing is Jesus says, okay, today you will be with me in paradise. Wow. And that's why we remember the Lord's Supper, because with the gift of Jesus on the cross overcomes this curse we call death, right? And so we have questions, though, that come out of that, like, where did they go? What does it mean? What is paradise? And where is paradise? What is it for? And do I go there when I die and leave this earth? And if not, where do I go? And so these are good questions we want to ask and try to answer in our lesson today about our heavenly home, because it's really about going home to heaven, isn't it? And that's our goal and our desire. And I don't have a clicker, so I need one. So if someone has an extra one, thank you, sir. So these are questions sometimes people don't ask, but they have them on their mind, and we want to answer them. But to set it up, there's many times on earth that we use a phrase, it's like hell on the earth, right? Let's go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Was it paradise then? Yeah. Well, the Jewish people in their Septuagint, the Greek, they use the word paradise to describe the Garden of Eden. There was no sin, there was no sickness, there was no death. They didn't even have to work. They just picked the fruit and tended to the garden. But then sin entered the world, and with sin came death. And it became so bad, we talk about the flood, that really there's hell on the earth in many ways, that everyone perished because they refused the invitation to get in the ark, and God started all over again. And then that takes us to the children of Israel. They were God's chosen people, and they're in Egypt, and their slavery was so bad, they're crying into heaven, God help us. It was hell on earth for them, wasn't it? And then God sent a deliverer who is a precursor or a picture of Jesus. What was his name? Moses. Oh, yeah, Moses visited the church this morning in the building, and he was downstairs with the kids, and just we want to thank Moses for showing up for the kids' class, and so they'll remember that forever. But Moses led them out of captivity and really the hellish conditions they were in until the promised land, which is a picture of what for us? Heaven. Now that takes us all the way up to the thief on the cross. I can't imagine any more hell on this earth to be hanging on the cross. Well, we talked about that in detail. And then Jesus, to promise him, says, get through this. On the other side, you'll be in paradise. There's a hope. You got to be mindful of the people that were suffering in the hurricane Helene, right? I tried to show a video in the warm, it wouldn't work, but it's just horrific. You've probably been seeing the pictures, and if you could help, at least in your prayers, you should be doing so. I mean, we're stories of people being swept away in the mud flows that came, and one lady saw her mother die and her child die being swept away, and it's just, they were saying it's of biblical proportions, alluding to the flood on the earth. It's not even close, but for them, it's hell on the earth, isn't it? Do we have anything to look for? Because life on this earth can be tough, can't it? So we're going to try to answer these questions and look at heaven and really what's waiting for us. And all I want you to do to go home with is the idea that whether you understand all the things we're talking about, because the answers aren't always really clear, but there's enough clues we can get an understanding of what's going on. Because how do you describe heaven when you've never been there? How do you describe heaven when it's a spiritual realm and we're locked in a physical one? We can never fully comprehend it fully But we get these pictures of what it's going to be like, and it just whets our appetite, and it's like, I want to go home. But here's the answer that I want to give you. As Christians, when you die, you can have the assurance that you're going to be with Jesus. And wherever he is, and we're going to show where he is, you're going to be with him. And that's what I want you to understand. And that's what we call heaven. And that's where heaven is. That's where Jesus is. So we're going to look at heaven. Then we'll look at paradise, that word. And then we're going to look at how the two come together when we die. But first of all, heaven is this place in the Bible that is used hundreds of times. In the Old Testament, it's used 378 times. In the New Testament, 259 times. But did you realize you got to be careful because the heaven, the word refers to three heavens, three different ones. Now you say, well, now I'm going to really get confused. I thought there was just one heaven. Well, we'll try to make sense of it. First of all, when you look in the Old Testament, when God created the heavens and the earth, that was a physical creation because he's already living where? In heaven itself. And so the word heaven is, the first heaven is spoken of this place that we call the air, the atmosphere, the sky. Because we see that there were waters above and there were waters below. And God made an expanse between the clouds above and the water on the earth. And he called that expanse heaven. And so that's where the birds fly. That's the first heaven, at least in the Jewish mind. And we refer to it sometimes as well. The second heaven is very similar. It's where the stars are. It's where the moon and the sun are. It's where spaceships fly, right? We call it the universe. We see the account of that in chapter 1 of verse 14. God made these lesser lights to rule in the night, the stars, but the moon and also the sun by the day, the larger light. And it sets seasons and everything, but it says he put them in the expanse of the heavens. And so we'll see that phrased when Abraham is called by God and he's going to give him this great nation. And he goes, how many children are you going to have? I don't even have one yet. He says, look into the heavens and count the stars. And that's how many children you're going to have. So the Bible refers to the universe as the heavens. That's the second heaven. First one is what? The air we breathe. The second heaven is the universe as far as it stretches out. And the third heaven is the most important, okay? And that is the spiritual realm where all the spiritual entities exist. In the book of Ephesians, it's called the heavenlies. We find that the spiritual forces of wickedness are in the heavenly places. You mean Satan is in heaven? No, not heaven, the place you're thinking, but he's in the spiritual realm. He's a spiritual entity. He's not a physical entity. And something about the entities and the angels and God and Jesus in the spiritual realm can come down to the physical. But we can't go there while we're in our physical body. So it's this vast place, this called, the spiritual realm. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul refers to it as the third heaven. He says, I don't know if I was awake or if I was asleep. I don't know if I was having a dream or a vision. I don't know if I was in my body or out of the body experience, but I was taken up into the third heaven. Which one's he talking about? He wasn't flying with the birds. He wasn't in outer space. He was in the spiritual realm. And that's why he was given a thorn of flesh, because things he saw were so amazing. He was given this thing to humble himself so he didn't start boasting like, hey, I got to see the heavenlies and you didn't. It's a place without time. Now, I'm going to describe it a little bit because the Bible does, and you won't be able to understand it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What happened before the beginning? Was God existing before the beginning? Well, when did the beginning start? When God created the heavens and the earth. Was there time before the beginning? No. He's like, what do you mean there wasn't time? I can't even understand. Time is a linear construct created for you and me. God lives outside of time. That's why you have this curious phrase with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, 1,000 years like a day. You say, well, that makes no sense. Because God doesn't count time like you and I do. He just is or is not. That's why Jesus was said, before Abraham was, I am. I exist before Abraham. He still did. Yes, he lives outside of time. When God created the heavens, the earth, we have time, but he creates matter. He creates dimension, the space, and and mass and weight and up and down. In the spiritual realm, there's no space. There's no dimensions. There's no physical things. Now we think about up, down, out. That doesn't exist. That just lives for what? That's for us. So when we think about the spiritual, it just blows your mind. Because you can't imagine. What's a spiritual realm? Well, God says, okay, since you can't understand the spiritual because you've never been there, it makes no sense to you, I'll describe it in physical terms. So thus we have streets of gold. Do you think there's really streets in heaven? No. Do you think they're gold? No. But it draws a picture of us. Like, man, if our streets were paved with gold here, everyone would be moving to Dallas, right? No. Everyone would be cutting up the streets in Dallas because they were made out of gold, right? And pearly gates. Are there really gates in heaven, you think? Made out of big, super giant pearls? No. He just uses pictures of the things that are the most amazing and wonderful to us. He said, that's the way heaven's going to be like, and even better. All right? So that's the third heaven. Satan is there. Angels are there. It's the dwelling place of God. And it's where Jesus resides right now. So when we look at it, we'll look at some text. Matthew chapter 5. Jesus says this to us. You let your light shine before men, so when they see your good works, they're going to glorify God who is where? In heaven. That's not obviously where the sky is. It's not where the stars are. This is obviously the spiritual realm. And then in chapter 6, we learn a lot of things that don't lay up your treasures on earth, but lay up your treasures where? Because on earth, people can steal them and rust will destroy them. But in heaven, there will be no thieves and there's no rust even. And that's interesting because I know as some of you get older, you're having your knees replaced and you're getting your eyes, lasered and all that. We're falling apart. In heaven, that doesn't happen. That's just a glimpse of what's going to go on there. It's interesting. He says, when you pray, don't pray to be heard in Matthew chapter 6 by men, because you get your reward from them. They think, wow, what a great guy you are. But pray in secret, but God who what? He hears in the spiritual realm everything you say on this earth. Now, how does he do that? I don't know. But in heaven, he hears what's going on down here right now. Then when you give, don't give publicly. So, wow, look how much he gave. Man, you give secretly, and your Father who sees and knows what you're given will reward you. Amen. Then finally, when you fast, don't fast to be seen. But God knows when you're fasting. You wash your face, and you don't go, oh, I'm so hungry, I haven't eaten for 2 hours. No, they would go all day, right? And oh, man, oh, you're so righteous. No, you don't do that. Because God knows, he sees what you're doing, even though he's in heaven. But it says, your Father who is in heaven will reward you. That's his dwelling place. That's where he abides permanently. That's where he is all. It's our final home. Hebrews chapter 11 talks about our heavenly city. Our heavenly country, which we're going towards. In our song we sang, mentioned that. And to Canaan's land, I'm on my way. That's speaking about it. But heaven is just beyond our comprehension, the third heaven. So let's take that and now turn our discussion to the word paradise. Paradise is an interesting word. It's a Persian word, and it literally means a garden. It means garden. And it described beautiful gardens of the day. So in the Greek, it's like paradise. So we get paradise from it. And as I mentioned, the Jews used that term, paradise, to describe the Garden of Eden. Because no death, no sickness, no work, no weeds. Remember that? Weeds came after the fall of man. It was truly what? Paradise. And you had marriage. That made it even better, the paradise. Marriage was part of paradise. Now we have weeds, sickness, cancer, death. We have to work. Marriages fall apart. It all goes bad after paradise was destroyed or left. But we have a promise of a coming paradise because he promised to the criminal on the cross, today you will be with me in, this is hell on this cross, but it's going to change that quickly. You're going to be in paradise. Well, let's learn what we can about it. It's used 3 times in the Old Testament, and it's used for parks and woods or forests. And the first one, Ecclesiastes, Psalm said, I made gardens and parks. Now this guy was trying to find some meaning in life, purpose, and he had all the power and all the riches and all the wisdom. So when he did things, he did them to the nth degree. So when this park was made, it was probably the most beautiful park in the world because he spared no expense. But he said, it doesn't make me fulfill me. So he tried to do something else. But that's why the word is used, paradise. He created a park that was paradise, all right? In Nehemiah, it speaks of a forest. So Anna and I were in Croatia, and there's this national park full of trees, and there's dozens, if not hundreds, of waterfalls. And when you walk through it, her comment, this is like paradise on the earth. It was one of the most beautiful places on the earth. You just walk through all the waterfalls, and it's amazing. But that's the word that is used for these parks that he made. The forests. The last time is Song of Solomon, your shoots are an orchard. That's the word paradise. Sometimes you look at the orchards, and don't they look beautiful here? The vineyards, especially when they start turning colors. So this word was used loosely to describe beautiful things, but in the New Testament, it's different. It was used in the New Testament to describe a realm outside, an unearthly realm that is beautiful like a park or an orchard or forest, but it mimics the paradise that used to exist on this earth. And it's used 3 times, like in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. But it didn't tell us much about what the place is like. He just tells the thief on the cross, today you're going to be with me where? In paradise. And he found out what it was like. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says, again, I was taken up, I don't know if in the body or not, into this 3rd heaven. But here he says, I was caught up into paradise. Oh, paradise is in the 3rd heaven. Well, that makes sense, but where? Because we know Hades is in the 3rd heaven as well. Remember when the rich man and Lazarus died? And we studied that last time. We looked at it. That Lazarus found himself in Abram's bosom, and then the rich man was in torment, but it was in the land of the unseen, the Hadean realm. It's in the 3rd heaven. But he's in the place, he's in paradise. And he heard some things that either he couldn't express them or he wasn't allowed to express them. I think the first phrase is not heard inexpressible words, which I weren't permitted to speak. In other words, even if I could say them, had permission, I couldn't find words to describe what I saw. It was so beautiful and amazing. You ever been speechless like that? My wife was the first time she saw me. Paradise on the earth. And it's been that way ever since, right, Ann? Well, that's what Paul saw. Now, the 3rd time is Revelation. This is very important because we're going to come back to this in a second. He's talking to the church at Ephesus, one of the 7 churches of Asia, saying, you got to overcome because there's great reward if you overcome. Keep your faith. Just hang in there. But he says, he who's an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat the tree of life. Now, where do we first see the tree of life? The Garden of Eden. Why were they removed from the Garden of Eden? Not because they sinned necessarily, but to guard the way to the tree of life. That's what it says at the end of chapter 3. To protect the way of the tree of life, lest they eat of it and live forever as fallen, sinful people to have this knowledge of evil. God said, I just don't want them living forever. And as Melinda says yesterday, I don't think she's here, wouldn't it be hellish on this earth to have this knowledge of evil and live in a fallen state and live forever? Like, get me out of here. That would be actually a curse. That's an interesting thought. So here he says, I'm going to grant you to eat of the tree of life. And where is this tree of life found? Paradise. Now we've learned something. The tree of life, when you eat of it, you will live forever. You think it's a physical tree? Say no, because in heaven there is no physical things. You know, Paul says flesh and blood, or this physical nature, cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. Jesus says the same thing. And so it's not a real tree, but it describes a real tree that's not physical, but it has the same qualities of a real tree, that if you eat of it, you will what? Live forever. So when we look at, those are the 3 times it used. So where is it, and how do I get there? Will I be there? And that's where we're going to introduce the most important part is, and the idea is wherever Jesus is, that's where you're going to be. And if we can discover where Jesus is, that's where we're going to will be, and that's where paradise is. And then we'll talk about, Lord willing, our next lesson, some blessings of heaven and why it's so great. But this is my place where I'm going to live with Jesus forever and ever. So we're going to show that. So the place of our eternal home is with Jesus, because he says, you're going to be with me. Where? So where did the thief go to? Paradise. Who did he go with? Jesus. Where did Jesus go to? He went to paradise. Now, sometimes we just concentrate on the thief. He gets to go to paradise. Well, who's there with taking him? Jesus. So where is Jesus going to take him? Paradise. This heavenly, spiritual, glorious garden, if you would. So wherever Jesus is, that's where you're going to find paradise. Okay? So let's look at it. Now, where is Jesus? We know where he is right now. He's in not the first heaven, not in the second heaven. He's in the third heaven. And you say, well, where? Now, when you say where, we're thinking of space, right? Is he over here? There is no space in heaven, right? It's all about relationship. Either you're with God or you're not. And we saw that last week. Hell is those people who said no to God. I won't have anything to do with you. So he said, that's fine. I'm going to cast you into the lake of fire. Is it a real lake of fire? No. But he throws them into him with Satan, and death is even thrown away. That's very important to note. And he says, you didn't want anything to do with me, so I'm going to eternally separate you from myself. There's no relationship with the God of glory, of goodness, of light, of joy, and peace. And when you don't have access to a relationship with that which is loving and joyous and peace, what do you have? Hell. It's all the bad things. Paradise is the opposite. It's a relationship with the God of our Father, who is love, joy, peace, light, happiness, goodness, everything that you want in this world. That's who he is. And when you're in heaven, you're in a relationship with him, and we're going to demonstrate that. But that's where Jesus is, and where is he sitting? Again, I got to ask the question, so we just beat this into our brains. Is there a literal throne in heaven? Say yes, but it's not literally physical. It's a spiritual throne. And a throne means rule and power. He sits on the throne, so who's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? It's not any man on the earth. It's not any devil. It's not any of his angels. It's Jesus Christ is in charge of everything. That's what makes paradise paradise, because of the one who's in charge. Then second of all, we'll look at some scriptures in Acts 1. It refers to Jesus if you want to be an apostle, you had to be with him until the day he was taken up to heaven. And then we see in chapter 7, Stephen says, I see the heavens opened. He got to see spiritually, wouldn't that be amazing, into the spiritual realm while he's on this earth right before he's killed. And the heavens open, and I see the Son of Man standing where? The right hand of God. That means he's going to be in charge. He's at the right hand of God. We see also in Ephesians chapter 6, masters, be careful you treat your slaves nicely, because you have a master and they have your master. And who is it? Jesus. And where is he? In heaven. Okay? In chapter 1, verse 20, we have this great power which was brought about in Christ when God raised him from the dead and seated at him his right hand in the heavenly places. So you have God, and who's on his right side in charge of everything? Jesus in the heavens. That's where he is. He's on the throne of God, and who's right next to him? The Father. And if that's where Jesus is, and that's where the criminal, the thief on the cross went, that's also called what? Paradise. Because Jesus went to paradise. And that's where he is right now, on the throne of God. So that's where we find paradise. And so, interesting, the New Testament, after the account of the rich man and Lazarus, which was before the cross, there was this waiting place. Remember, you have Lazarus in Abraham's bosom, and you have the rich man in torment, and there's a gulf. He can't go between the two. And often you think, well, when I die, I just go to that waiting place, waiting for the judgment. And we're going to talk about that, Lord willing, coming up. But that happened before the cross. It's changed since the cross. That waiting place no longer exists for the righteous people, because they were waiting for the blood of Christ. And that's why God said, Satan, don't touch them, because I'm going to take care of them, because they've lived by faith. And Jesus, when he entered the grave, he rendered powerless him who had the power of death, that's Hebrews chapter 2, and delivered them who were held captive by Satan for all these years. That's the righteous saints. They were taken to heaven with him. In captivity, was led captive. We'll talk about this in detail later. But anyone after the cross, when he speaks about dying, where do they talk about going? Guess where? To be with Jesus. Be with Jesus. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul uses this word tabernacle or tent to refer to our body, because you're a spirit living in a physical body. And death is when your spirit leaves the body, right? It's a tabernacle, a tent, because the tabernacle literally was a tent in the Old Testament, right? So he says, we know that if our earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, what does that mean? Torn down. You what? You die. It's done. Your spirit's released, but we're going to have a building from God, a house not made with hands. In other words, it's divinely made. Eternal where? In the heavens. For indeed in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling that comes from heaven. That's our new spiritual body. We'll talk about that then in our study on the resurrection. Chapter 5 and verse 6 now. Therefore be of good courage. This is talking to you and me, especially them in their days who were undergoing persecution and dying for their faith. It was hell on the earth for them. Knowing that while we're at home in the body, we're absent from who? So spiritually and physically, you can't be in two places at one time. And I'm so glad you're here, because you're in the right place, because you can't be here and somewhere else at this time. But God says that's also true spiritually. When you're at home in your body, like, I don't want to die, well, then you'll never be with Jesus. You're absent from who? The Lord. Do you get that? But when you're absent from the body, verse 8, that means you've what? You died. Well, that's scary. I don't want to die. I don't want to leave you. You get to be with the Lord. You can't be in two places at one time. And as long as you're in this body, you can't be with Jesus. You can't be in paradise. You can't not be in heaven with God. And so when a person understands the call of the gospel, they're saying, Lord, come quickly, take me home. I can't wait to get out of this world, this body. And the only reason I want to stay is for others. Family, friends, and the work that you have given me to do. But see that when you die, where do you go? With the Lord. Where is he? At the right hand of God in paradise. One more verse. Philippians. Paul has been in prison. It's a prison epistle. And he said, man, I think I'm going to get out of here because of the prayers of the saints. But he says something very curious. For me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. The old King James says profitable. What? What's the profit in dying? Have you lost your mind, Paul? No one wants to die. We do everything to hang on to life on this earth. We spend all our dollars just to stay alive a little longer. Paul said, no, you got it wrong. To die is profitable. It really advances your life. Well, how? Because I don't know. To live on the flesh means more fruitful labor for you, for the cause of Christ. That's what I said. We stay because of family and for friends and for saving souls. But I'm hard pressed. Having the desire to depart. What does depart mean? Die. He knew when he died, he would be with Christ. Now, either Christ is in that waiting place. You think that's where he is, in the waiting place? Or is he at the right hand of God? That's where he is. And Paul knew that as soon as he died, he'd be there in paradise with Jesus. Isn't that exciting? There's nothing for Christians to fear about death because death is your birth into heaven. And it's really when life begins in reality. This is like training period. This is like kindergarten. This is like being in the womb spiritually. And we're waiting to be birthed into our glorious state with God in heaven. So, a couple more. Revelation chapter 6. He sees underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain. They died as martyrs on the earth. And they're beneath the altar of God. And they're actually talking to God. He said, how long before you'll judge and avenge our blood? So they're before Jesus and crying to him. That shows, again, when you die after the cross, since you have been forgiven of all your sins, where do you go immediately? Before the throne of God. So let's put it all together. We know that the location of paradise is revealed because, remember we read this verse? Overcome, and I'm going to grant you to eat the tree of life, which where's the tree of life? It's in this beautiful park called what? Paradise. It's a park full of trees. It's like an orchard, the most beautiful orchard and park you've ever seen because it's spiritual. And that's where Jesus is. That's where the Father is and all his archangels and everyone prays and glory to him. Is there any sin, any sickness, any death? No. He said, if you just hang in there, I'll let you eat the tree of life in paradise. So it's interesting. If I can find the tree of life, I know we'll know where paradise is. I got to find the tree of life. Now, there's no Google map that'll direct you there. But here's our directions right here, right? Amen. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no man can come to the Father except through me. And that's why we're disciples of Christ, because we follow him, because we want to go home to be with Christ. It's not about being religious. It's about what we're meant here to be for. We're meant here to follow Jesus, to love like Jesus, live like Jesus, so we can bring people with us, but it's to go home and follow Jesus to paradise. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. So let's look at a couple texts, and we'll see where the tree of life is, and the lesson will be yours. Revelation 22. I know Revelation scares a lot of us. But a lot of it's very literal, and it's easy to understand if we'll just take our time and look at it. So I'm going to actually read this, Revelation 22. It's the end of the revelation that was given to John. And verse 1 begins this way. And this angel showed me the river of the water of life, clear as a crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. So here's God on his glorious throne, who's standing or sitting right next to him, Jesus. And what's coming from his throne? The river of life. Isn't this going to be a beautiful garden already? In the middle of its street, and on either side of the river, I'm in verse 2 now, was the tree of life. So somehow this tree is so magnificent, it straddles its roots both sides of the river. And I can't imagine what it looks like. But when we look at that and look at the text here, we see the tree of life is by the river of life, which is coming from the throne of God. And so Jesus said, wherever the tree of life is, that's where paradise is, because that's where the tree of life is. So this is a picture of what? Paradise. So let me read verse 2. And on either side of the river was a tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. There shall be no longer any curse, because the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his bondservants shall serve him. There will be something for us to do. And they shall see his face, and his name will be on our foreheads. It's relationship. No more curse. Where'd that curse start? In the garden. It's gone. In chapter 21, he says there will be no more tears. There's a picture of God wiping the last tear from your eye. And most people, when they leave this earth, it's under duress, isn't it? Sickness, an accident. My first experience with death, real hands-on, was when my dad died. And I'm sure you have all your own stories, but my story is my story. And sometimes you're naive when you don't understand what death is like. You see it on the movies, or you read about it. I heard my mom talk about how a drunk hit their car going home for Christmas and killed my sister that I've never met yet. 5-year-old girl named Kathy, most beautiful girl they said in the world. Killed her. She talked about how I had a brother I've never met either, who died after 2 weeks after birth, just couldn't make it. It's all because of the curse, isn't it? That's where death came from, because sin in the paradise, the fallen world. So then you live with your parents, and you think they're going to live forever. And Dad progressively got worse, because he was in an accident, almost killed him. He had one of the first open heart surgeries that caused brain damage and lack of oxygen. And he had Parkinson, and we were living in Coeur d'Alene at the time, and we made all these trips. Like, he's dying, this is it. We'd run down there, and he'd recover, we'd go home. Probably did that, seemed like a half a dozen times. When the time finally came, I left my family and lived with my mom in the room with my dad, because she didn't want to be alone. And I slept with him for 2 weeks in separate beds, waiting for him to pass. It was excruciatingly hard. And he would stop breathing in the middle of the night, so I finally put a little ducky on his chest. And I look over, if the ducky's moving, I know he's still breathing. And I just wanted to be there when he passed. I stepped out of the room after 2 weeks. He was a strong man, just wouldn't pass. And we finally had conversation. Dad, it's okay. We'll take care of Mom. It's okay. It's okay. Stepped out of the room, and he died. And I couldn't believe it. I was gone for a moment. He passed. And I don't know if angels escorted him home. And there were some of our family members there. And I just remember when I heard that he died, I just wailed. This scream of agony came out of me. And I look back and it still scares me. Like, where'd that come from? Because I'm not one to cry a lot, especially wail. And it was this visceral, and everyone looked at me, and it was a response to the curse of death. Because it's so final on this earth. But Christianity gives us hope. Heaven is our home. It's our hope. It's our call. It's the only thing we can really look forward to that makes sense of all this world, because it's crazy in this world. And there's good times. I know that. I get that. But the real glory and the hope is there. There's no more curse. And he said, this tree of life, which you get to eat from, it's for the healing of the nations. And I don't know what you're sick of, but I'm sick and tired of a lot of things. He's not just talking about physical healing. He's talking about the pains and the nightmares you have and all the problems you have and broken families and issues and the guilt you carry. Even though you feel like, I'm forgiven, I don't feel forgiven. The tree of life is for the healing. When you come get to paradise, it's all going to be forgotten. There'll be no more tears. That's the joy that Jesus says when we're faithful. Enter into the joy of thy master. It's a joy we want to talk about later, next time. But I hope you understand, heaven is something so exciting. You just can't wait to get there. And that's why even John says, Lord, come quickly. It's our greatest hope. It's the hope you have a desire. Like Paul, the word desire means he lusted to go in a right way. I just want to leave and go to heaven because it's so great and wonderful. Remember, he was taken into paradise and saw things. So he knows. And his message is here. You don't want to stay here. You want to get out. Now, if you're with as a Christian and you say, well, I'm not sure I'm going. Well, maybe you don't believe the gospel. Can I say that again? If you say, well, I don't know if I'm good enough, or I've been done enough, or I've been forgiven enough, you don't understand the gospel. You need to work on your faith, because the faith says what? As was the Lord's Supper, Jesus said, I paid it for you. Amen. I punched the ticket. You just follow me, and you're going to heaven. We know we're going. Amen. Because of what Jesus did, not what we haven't done or what we did in the past. Amen. I hope you think about that. And if you're not a Christian, my prayer for you is you don't want the curse. You don't want the final death, hell. And God's been calling you, did everything he can to get you to come and be in a relationship with him. And that's what Jesus Christ is all about. If you need to know and you want to study, we'd be glad to sit down with you. Or if you know what you need to do, just let us know and make your wishes now, and we'll make sure that you're on your way to heaven. We're going to sing a song. Let's stand together and do that in less than